Hello, hello, and welcome to this video on JavaScript. We will continue our study of functions in JavaScript. In this video, we will talk about few things. One of those is whether the variables are passed by value or they are passed by reference or address, whatever. The second thing which we will talk about is the default and optional arguments. And the last thing we will talk about is the variable or var functions or variadic functions and how we can implement them. We will also see some legacy JavaScript. So the first question is whether the values or arguments which we pass to a function are by value or by reference. So what we do is we take two variables, A and B. A is set to 4 and B is set to 5, and we send them to a function AB. So this function, what it does is it has a typical swap implementation where TNP is equal to A is equal to B, and B is equal to TNP. Now, if the variables are passed by value, that is a copy is passed, then the value will not change. And if the address or reference of the functions is passed, that is, it is not a copy, that is, this A and B are not copy of this A and B, then the value will change. So let's see this in action. Okay, I have already run this. So we see the value does not change. That means a copy was made and sent to the function. So now the question is, how do we implement a swap function then? Okay. So let's see. We comment this out and we implement another swap function rather. So what we do in this function is we return an array with two elements. First of those is B and second is A, and then we receive them as AB. So this reverses the order and our values A and B will be swapped. There you go. Sorry, BA swap AB. Okay, I have not saved it. So there you go. It is swap. Okay, that is how we swap. So in JavaScript, typically you don't need to write this. You can simply say b comma a. You don't need this function. Okay, and the values will be swapped. Now the question is why this behavior is there. We will see in a bit why this behavior is there. So we comment this out and we comment this out. So that was for the plain variables. How about an array? Okay. So what we do is we take an array, okay, which has three integers, 1, 2, and 3. In JavaScript, there is nothing called integer. It is all floating point numbers behind the scenes. But since the values are a whole number, I'm calling them integer. And we send it to a function called push one element. In that function, we push value 4. Now, if a copy of A is made, like the plain variables A and B, then this A won't be modified. It will remain 1 to 3. But if the same A that is inside the function, this A or this A is same as this A, then it will have 4 as part of the value. Let's see. So you see that original value is maintained in the function. That is, the copy was not made. So now the question is why plain values are sent by copy, but arrays are sent by reference or address, you can say. That is, the copy is not made. The answer lies in the fact that if you make a copy of an array, then what can happen is an array can be very large. Okay, and if you make a copy, then it is very expensive operation to make copy of large arrays. So that is why arrays are not sent as a copy. A copy of array is not sent to a function. But plain variables are cheap to copy. That is why the copy is made. Of course, languages like JavaScript do not have pointers, so you can't implement both the functionalities. But even if you talk about languages like C or C++ or Rust, large values, for example, arrays in C or vector in C++, or say for example vector in Rust, you don't want to pass large values. Although, for example, in C, you can send structures by value. A copy will be made and you pass the entire structure. Arrays degrade to pointers, of course. So that is not good. We don't want to do that even if language allows that. But in languages like JavaScript, it is set for you. You cannot send a plain simple variable, or rather the primitive variables, by reference or address. A copy is made, but arrays are sent as original copy. That is, a copy is not made for arrays. Now that is for arrays. Now let's talk about objects. How about objects? Same story repeats for object also, which was there for array. Objects can be arbitrarily large. So we have this object O, which has two properties, X and Y, and then we add one Z over here. And we see that when we invoke the function add one property, the property is retained even after call of the function. So they behave exactly like array as far as value is concerned, for the same reason. Now we will talk about some arguments. Okay. Now when you have JavaScript does not care about how many arguments you are sending to the function when you call it. Okay. It does not even check whether the values passed match the argument or not. It does not. Okay. So for example, we have this function here. Okay. All right. So here we are supposed to send an object O and we are supposed to send an array A. Now this array A, if you don't pass, or O you don't pass, they will become undefined. So what we do first is, if A is undefined, we set it to empty array. It is better written as A is equal to A logical OR and then empty brackets. That is, if A is undefined, it will be set to empty array. And then we iterate over the object and we put the properties in the array A, and finally we return A. Okay, now we have this object O and P and we send it to O, and then we get property names PA. So what will happen is all the properties of O and P will come in the array A. Okay, so you see that here we call with one argument and here we call with two arguments. In the first case, it will array A will become undefined. That is, this A will become undefined and it will be set to empty array. So let's run and see this function. A is undefined. So what we need to do is we need to set let A. Okay. So we run this and we see that indeed the three properties of O and P are added to the array. So remember that JavaScript does not care how many arguments. Okay. Now we need to see, you can do some logical changes to the function. For example, what we can do is if O, okay, so we can set it to this, okay, and we need to give parentheses around this, okay, and then you don't even pass this O. It doesn't matter, it will still run. Now O became undefined, its property did not get added to A, and the function worked. So in JavaScript, all arguments are optional, they will be just become undefined. Okay. Now what can happen in JavaScript is that you can refer to the second argument, or rather you can refer to any arguments if it has come before that. For example, in this width is you can pass, and height will automatically become 2 if you don't supply height explicitly. So here you will receive an object 1 2. All right. Let me save this program and we run this, and it became 1 2. One more thing, what you should do in this function is, rather, you should declare this as a default argument. Then you don't need this. Okay. If you give a default value. When you do this, empty array becomes the default value of A. So whenever you won't pass A, it will become an empty array. Okay. And when you pass an array, it will take the value of that. For example, here width into 2 is the default value of height. So width is kind of an argument which you need to pass. Height is optional. If you don't pass width, then it will give you an error that it can't multiply height with. Oh, it became none. See, the wonderful thing about Java. If you multiply and define with 2, it becomes a none. All right. So JavaScript has many quirks. Now we will talk about variadic functions, which can take several arguments. Okay. So in ES6, that is ECMAScript 2015, we have the REST parameter here. So what happens here, the first parameter default value is minus infinity or whatever you set. And all other parameters will be in this array, REST array. It is always an array. It is never undefined. It should be the last parameter. And if you don't pass it, it becomes the empty array. So we have this function. We pass 1, 10, 100, 2, 3000, 4, 5, 6. Now 1 is deliberately no, 1 is fine. Okay. So first is defined as minus infinity here. There is reason for that because this function is going to calculate max value. So max value is assigned the value first, then we iterate over the array rest, and if n is greater than max value is equal to n, and we return max value. Now you see why first is defined as the smallest possible value. If you want a min function, then first should be plus infinity and n should be less than min value. We will call it min value, right, for minimum of the function. So rest becomes an array, that is the value of rest is array of these many elements which I have highlighted. 1 becomes the first. Okay, and there we go. We have 1000 as the output. Why this is all coming here? So we comment this out. Okay. All right, we don't need this anymore. Now, prior to ES6, JavaScript had something called arguments. Okay. So whatever you pass, it becomes arguments. That is, X is all the arguments here. It will go into arguments keyword, okay, and it is an array, and we can iterate over the array and get the max value just like that. Okay, there is no role of this X here. See, so what REST was doing, arguments does the same, but you should not use arguments. Right? Arguments you should see in old legacy code, and there are problems with arguments. All right, it is difficult to optimize, hard to understand, and it appears like a magic. While here it is clear that it is a REST parameter. Here you don't have anything in the function argument, and out of nowhere we have got arguments here. It is not clear that it is there. It just exists. It is more like magic. So in modern code, you should not use arguments, but it works. It is just for the sake of completion. I'm talking about arguments. Okay. So arguments is an array. You iterate over it and apply the max value logic, and you can then return the max value. Okay. Again, you see that max value is initialized with minus infinity. So I think I will end this video here, and we talked about quite a few things, and I hope that you have found this useful, and you will be able to employ this in your programming work. So we will meet again after 4 days in another video of JavaScript and functions. So I thank you for watching the video, and I'll take my leave here. If you have any questions or comments, what you can do is you can make use of the comment box. Otherwise, you can come to my website, pandika.astrolock.org. It's a question answer forum application which I have created. You can come register here. It was deployed yesterday, so you can ask questions here. And right now I'm the only user. Nobody has come or joined. And I'll create tags here. So for JavaScript question, you can make use of the JavaScript tag, and you can ask a question, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So once again, thanks a lot for watching the video, and we'll meet again after 4 days in another video of JavaScript and functions. Till then, I'll say bye to you and keep practicing and enjoy.